is I have a PowerPoint. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ranjan?
Yes.
So would you like me to send the PowerPoint?
I will talk to Sumen.
Yeah, I can share it from here, so that should not be a problem.
Sumen, PowerPoint sharing.
আমার মন বলে চাই 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 গো যারে নাহি পাই গো আমার মন বলে চাই 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 গো সকল পাওয়ার মাঝে আমার মনে বেদন বাজে নাই 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 গো আমার মন বলে চাই 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 গো আমার মন বলে চাই 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 গো হারিয়ে যেতে হবে আমায় ফিরিয়ে পাবো তবে হারিয়ে যেতে হবে আমায় ফিরিয়ে পাবো তবে সন্ধ্যা তারা যায় যে চলে ভোরের তারায় জাগবে বলে বলে সে যাই 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 গো আমার মন বলে চাই 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 গো আমার মন বলে চাই 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 গো যারে নাহি পাই গো আমার মন বলে চাই 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 গো
total number of view কত আছে হালকা দিয়ে রেখেছি
বাতাস বহে মোরে মোরে আর বেঁধে রেখো না তোরে সকল বেলা যে কবে নিয়ে আমার বাঁশি বাজাবে গো আপনি আসি কবে নিয়ে আমার বাঁশি বাজাবে গো আপনি আসি আনন্দময় নীরব রাতের নিবিড় আধারে দাঁড়িয়ে আছো তুমি আমার গানের পারে আমার সুরগুলি পায় চরণ আমি পাইনি তোমারে দাঁড়িয়ে আছো তুমি আমার গানের পারে
Chitto, are you here? Chitto,
Yes, ma'am.
CRM. CRM is not CRM here?
Yes, ma'am. Serum is visible.
Then let's start it. 2 minutes left. Chitto,
Eco হবে।
where is CRM?
Serum sir, please unmute. Sir, please unmute. Serum sir, please unmute yourself. Yeah. Okay, fine.
Yes, yes. Fine.
Start it.
Ready? Okay. Acha, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to a national webinar organized by the Department of Political Science in collaboration with the IQAC of Bagnan College. So today we have two esteemed speakers, and our topic is the changes in the international order in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. So before going to the detail of the session, I would like to request the teacher in charge of our college, Professor Suma Mukhopadhyay, and say something about the webinar. And it's to Mrs. Suma Mukhopadhyay, Professor Suma Mukhopadhyay, to officially open the webinar. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
Long 5 months we are living under the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. But now, as human beings, I think this is time to look beyond our personal lives. Does any change take place in the international order due to this pandemic? I am not very sure about it. But we have two esteemed speakers today, and I believe they will explain the situation to us. If any change has already taken place, I want to know, will it be long lasting? Anyway, I greet all present here, and particularly the two resource persons. I believe the webinar today will be a great success. Thank you all. Over to Piyash Chakraborty.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the IQAC of Bagnan College,
Is it? Can you see it? Hello.
Yeah. Yes.
Is the PowerPoint visible?
Yes. Visible. Somen, are
Suman, can you see it? Hello.
hello, Somen?
Okay. Okay. All right. So let me set up the slide. Yeah. Please. How is it? Can you see it now? All right. Yeah. So yeah, let me start here. So I'll be speaking about a post-COVID world order. And in that, I'll start with two broad assumptions. One of that was pointed out very nicely by Ms. Soma Mukhopadhyay just now. And she said that, it's not very clear that post-COVID, we are going to see a world which is very different. And she is absolutely right. But there are two sides of it. One is, some of the people believe that COVID is likely to transform or having a... Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, okay, because, yeah, can you just
Yes, sir.
ask everybody to mute because there was some noise disturbance coming here. So, yeah, may I request all of you to please mute your mic so that there is no disturbance. And one more thing, Chitranjan, when my time is over, you'll have to stop me because as a teacher, we are used to speaking, and so let me know when my time is up and I'll conclude, okay? So thank you so much. I'm coming back to just two things. There are two broad assumptions about this international order. That first says that COVID is likely to transform or have a long-lasting impact on the world order. And the second assumption is that some of the people believe, and there are a lot of scholars like Joseph Nye, who writes on soft power, etc. So they argue that COVID is unlikely to transform the existing world order. What it's going to do is that it's going to accelerate or accentuate the existing trend, which means that whatever fault lines that we have in today's world order, so that is going to get accentuated. So that is second opinion about the world order. Now, what I see that there's an overwhelming sense of loss and anxiety. And Ms. Soma Mukhopadhyay also pointed out that how she is worried and how people are worried. But this worry that we are talking about, the concern that we are all thinking about on a day-to-day basis, this thinking is not just about this concern, or the worry is not just among the individuals. Even the states and the communities are very anxious. There is a sense of loss and anxiety among the people, society, and also the state. And I'll explain you how the state is very anxious. If you can see the PowerPoint here, so the US is feeling the most powerful state in the system. US is feeling cheated, and US is also feeling discriminated because of the rise of China. US thinks that some of the privileges which were there in the earlier period, in the post-Cold War period, those privileges are gradually fading away. The kind of influence that US used to have in the 90s or even during the Cold War period, that is gradually going away. So that is the kind of anxiety that you see even with the state, the most powerful state in the system. But US is not the only one which is feeling anxious or a sense of anxiety. China, if you see, China thinks that first, China carries a huge baggage China thinks that because of colonialism or because of the last 1,000 years of history, there is a sense of humiliation of Chinese sovereignty. They think that China has not got the right place in the international system, and China thinks at the moment that when the time has come for China, the Western countries or the other countries are trying to contain China. So China thinks that the kind of entitlement that it should have with the rise of economy or with the rise of military power, so China is not getting that entitlement. So the sense of loss you see in China also. What is about India? India is equally feeling constrained. India is also feeling, India thinks that India is entitled to play a greater role in the international system. But because of the certain regimes in the international system, and also because of some neighbors like Pakistan or China, India is unable to achieve the rightful place in the system. There are some constraints for India, like United Nations Security Council, where India is not a member. There are some nuclear regimes which are very discriminatory for India, a nuclear supply group, etc. And also in the IMF and the World Bank, the kind of voting rights or the kind of role that India should be playing in the global governance. So India thinks that India is not getting that role in the international system. Similarly, European Union is also feeling discriminated by its own institution. If I talk of the countries of the European Union, you know that Brexit happened when Great Britain went away from European Union, and many of the countries in the European Union, they are thinking that the kind of supranational institutions which were created by the earlier governments, those institutions are not serving the interest of the state. And as a consequence, the European countries are divided among the people who are Eurosceptic who are suspicious of the European Union as a supranational institution, but also there are people who support European Union. So you see that people all over the world are divided. Some of the people, I'll tell you that how there is a loss among the people also. Coming to the sense of anxiety among the among the people and the society. So there is a material sense of anxiety, and there is also a social insecurity, and that social insecurity is reflecting in the policy making. Material anxiety, because many of the people have lost. Economy was prevalent also in the pre-COVID period. In United States, it was down. This European Union, there are a lot of unemployment. China had slowed down from 9% to China had come down in 6% also in the pre-COVID period. Indian economy after demonetization, it never really recovered. So Indian economy was also going down earlier. So what I'm trying to say that there is a sense of material insecurity, and many of the people lost jobs. I'll tell you how in the COVID it has accentuated, it has accelerated, but the sense of loss was there even in the previous period. And very interesting, if you see that communities are feeling discriminated. And I'm not saying just about the minority. Minority all over the world are feeling the pressure on all the democracies, whether you are talking about European countries or you are talking about United States, Britain, India, China, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Everywhere the minority, they are feeling insecure. And the COVID and the kind of authoritarian system, majoritarian system that we have, they have come very harsh upon the minorities, and there is no doubt about it. But the interesting thing that I would like you to understand is that it's not just the minority which is facing the brunt of this economic slowdown or the insecurity that the international system is throwing out. Even the majority. In India, you may know, if I give you the example, so in India, Hindus are feeling insecure. They are hurt by so-called secularism. They're also hurt by the policies of the neighbors. So it's not just the minority which is feeling. The majority are also claiming that that the previous governments or the previous regimes, they were not very they did not support the causes for the welfare of these people. And this is a global phenomena. It's not just about India. In US, you see the white reaction is very, very strong. In European countries, they are very much against the minority in the European countries, against the refugees, against the minority in France, Germany, everywhere. and majority community everywhere they're feeling the kind of entitlement or the kind of role that they should be playing in the system. So that is not happening, and the politicians have mobilized that kind of anger. And as you see that in all the countries all over the world, you have political parties which are ruling, and they are supported by a very discriminatory policy where they support majoritarian kind of government. I'm talking about Hungary, Poland, all these 10 European countries. I'm talking about the United States. I'm talking about India. I'm talking about Turkey. I'm talking about Japan. I'm talking about Philippines. So you give me an example of democracy, and I'll tell you how not only minority but majority is also kind of feeling. So that kind of anxiety we are dealing with in the present world order. Muslims are feeling hurt. Muslims in not only in India, Muslims all over the world, they are feeling hurt for a number of reasons. One is that Muslim minorities are there in different countries, so they are feeling very suffocated because of the majoritarian policies. But if you see the broader organization of Islamic country, there is a sense that the Muslim countries are being targeted by the Western countries. Muslim countries, they think the people in the Muslim countries, they think that the Catholic or the Christians, they are targeting this religion. They think that China is targeting this religion in Xinjiang province. They think that Indian policy, which was secular, is gradually shifting towards cultural nationalism and which is discriminatory to the Muslim minority in India. But it does not stop there. What is interesting is that the Christians, the Christians, they are also feeling a sense of anxiety, a sense of loss. European countries, because they are losing their influence throughout the world, because the other countries like China, India, they are becoming global players. They are becoming economically, politically, and militarily very important. So there is a sense that the kind of influence that Christianity used to have in the international system, that is gradually going down. Chinese similarly, Chinese, as I told you, that they are also feeling the sense of loss. So what I'm trying to tell you that, the sense of anxiety, sense of loss, and the sense of feeling discriminated, this is widespread. The kind of situation that we are facing today, probably if I had asked you the same question 7 years back, probably you would not have agreed to me. But today, every community, they portray as if, they have suffered for the last so many years. In democracies, what is happening that the leaders are highly incompetent. Whether I'm talking of United States as a leader, that how United States has totally isolated itself from the international system. United States is not supporting many of the international organizations which were created by United States with support of European countries, and where United States used to play a very important role. For instance, you have seen how WHO has become redundant today. You know that how IMF and the World Bank, the kind of role that they should have played, they are not playing any role. You know how United Nations Security Council, it is unable to do anything at all. Many of the agenda are not even accepted, because the United Nations Security Council today is completely divided on the issue of Syria, on the issue of South China Sea, or on the issue of the conflict between India and China, etc. There is nothing that the United Nations Security Council can do. So you can see that how institutions are international institutions which used to play a very powerful role or very important role in the international system. They are gradually becoming defunct. They are not playing the role which they were expected to play. So what the leaders are doing, very interesting that the leaders of these countries, whether India, United States, Japan, or China, they are shifting the blame on other enemies. They are creating their own enemies. In democracy with multi-party system, as in India or in the United States, you will see that they blame the previous government. They blame the other party. Democratic Party is blamed in United States by Trump administration. They think that the Trump administration thinks that most of the problems in United States were created by the Democratic Party, and as a consequence, they blame internally to the people who support Democratic Party, and externally they blame China. So they, instead of dealing with the economic issues, which is their own creation, instead of dealing with the actual COVID crisis, which they're facing on a massive basis, you know that in United States, nearly 2 lakh people have died by now. So instead of focusing on these issues, Trump administration is first blaming the Clinton and the Obamas, and they're blaming China and other countries for the misery in the United States. So they're shifting the blame. In India, what do you see? In India, the previous governments are constantly blamed for the regime which was there for the last 70 years. They are blamed, and they also blame on the minority, and they link the entire policy with the neighboring policy. That they think that they'll always blame that Nehru for China, Nehru for Pakistan. So what is happening, that this kind of phenomena is happening everywhere. You blame the previous government and link the policy of previous government with the threats which might be real or perceptive threat, but you link the policies with those countries, and then you blame the other people. And instead of dealing with the present crisis, whether in the case of India, I'll tell you the economic crisis that we are facing, the kind of unemployment, the 5 crore people have lost jobs during the COVID, and also before the COVID. China is on our border. It has occupied some of the territory. So what we are trying to do, that instead of dealing with the issues, we are shifting the blame to others. Why is it happening? The reason is that the kind of enormous economic, social, and security issues that all these countries are facing, the leaders are not capable to deal with these issues. So what they do, they take the easiest way out, and I'll tell you what they are doing. And there's a massive misinformation campaign which is happening, where the social media information, the kind of total media control that you see in today's world. And media control is not just Indian phenomena where the state is funding and controlling the media. Majority of the media, I'm not saying all the media houses are controlled, but majority of the media in many countries now, they speak the voice of the state. They do not speak independent voice, because they're funding the threat, their security, their survival becomes an issue if they do not take the very supportive position for the state. This is happening in India, Russia, Iran, Turkey, everywhere. Also in Japan, and to an extent in United States. Although some of the media houses in United States are still not under the control of the Trump administration. So how are we responding? Very interesting. If you see the policies that they are policy of the leaders in India or in the United States or Russia, for instance, they take the easiest way out. When you are dealing with a world which is uncertain, you resort to policies of orthodoxy, nationalism, and authoritarianism. I'm using this phrase from the Russian context because whenever the Tsarist policy, in the Tsarist period, whenever there was a confusion about what kind of policy they should adopt, they always stuck to the past. They always borrowed the policies of the past, which basically meant orthodoxy, nationalism, and authoritarianism. But in today's context also, when you see the kind of policies which are being accepted and promoted by Trump administration or Erdogan of Turkey or of the BJP of India, also to an extent in Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. So they are adopting policies. They are going back to tradition, and they are accepting policies which cater to the religious sentiment, which promotes Zingoism and hardcore nationalism, and which also leads to centralization of policy. So this is happening across the world, and democracy, dissent, secularism, and pluralism, the features which characterized the modernity, which characterized the policies of the Cold War period, or these were taken for granted in a democracy. Now these values are no longer taken for granted, and people are struggling on a day-to-day basis in all the countries to sustain the values of democracy, dissent, and secularism, and also pluralism. And that has come under threat, and partly because of that, the maximum brunt is faced by the minority and the people who are not in majority. But it does not mean that the majority is actually supporting the policies of the government, but many times the majoritarian voice is manipulated by the government as an instrument. So that has become a real problem in international order today, and the states do not know how to deal with such issues because media is monopolized, media is controlled by the ruling party, and the informal media now is also controlled, and data control, because we are living in the world of data. I'm interacting with you through data, so that data control has become a real issue. And now all the governments, they have employed the surveillance mechanism. In China, you have seen that with the app they were trying to trace that how people were getting infected. So there is a surveillance system in China, and people started in China. People do not have freedom of speech, they do not have liberty, they do not have freedom, so they do not have the voice to speak against the government. But if they have this kind of surveillance, then your movement can be controlled, your activity can be controlled, the kind of political choice that you make, that can be controlled. So that surveillance has become a real issue in today's world. When Indian government is also talking of giving health card to the people, so there is a fear that the state will control our data, and the state will control the political choice and the freedom that we exercise in the private. Our privacy and our freedom of speech is really at stake, not only in India but China, Russia, United States, practically everywhere. And all the states are behaving in a very immature way. If you see, every country is talking about America first, because the international system is not in their favor. So they're saying America first, which means they'll promote American industry. They'll focus on America, and they do not care about the international institutions, which according to them serve the broader international interest, and they're not bothered about it. India every day you might be saying India first. Russia says Russia first, China says China first. Now the question is that if everybody is first, then who comes second? No country would like to come second. So that has become a real issue, and that is leading to a lot of conflict in the international system. So what is happening at the global level? You will see that apart from the populism and majoritarianism that you see across the globe, but you see that there is an increasing insularity and protectionism in the international system. What I mean by that is the countries which promoted free trade, the countries which actually led to the international liberal order, like United States, European countries. Now in those countries, they are the ones actually who have started this policy of protectionism. And now the United States is saying that because they need to cut down the trade deficit with China, with India, and with a number of other countries. So they are promoting protectionism, where that they will raise the tariff for importing products from other countries, and they'll try to promote their own industry. In what India is saying that I want to make our economy Atmanirbhar. Atmanirbhar means self-reliant economy. Similarly, if these countries are saying, so if the question is that if all the countries start talking of Atmanirbhar or the self-reliant, then what will happen to the kind of import-export that we had created? There are certain advantages and disadvantages. I'm not saying that India should not be self-reliant. India should not have a very developed manufacturing basis. Yes, India should have manufacturing bases which are very developed. But the question is that if we have trade deficit with one country, so we have trade surplus with many countries. If I tell you that with all the South Asian countries and all the neighboring countries, we have trade surplus with Nepal, $6 billion, with Bangladesh, $7 to $8 billion. We have trade surplus with Sri Lanka, $6 billion. So what I'm saying that if all the countries start having a policy of protectionism, then India would be at disadvantage, because we have huge cheap labor, and we can have a very fast production of manufacturing. As we have some advantages in pharmaceutical, in steel, in a number of other sectors, also in textile, some clothes, etc. So if India needs to have a very open policy with number of European countries. If European countries shut down their import from countries like China, India, and other countries, so it's going to be increasingly difficult for us to acquire the foreign currency. Remittance that we get from the other countries is not enough, and we import a lot of energy, $75 billion or something energy we export from number of countries. So we need to export to other countries so that we can develop our own this industries. What we need to do is that we need to be more competitive rather than protective. We need to make our industries more protective, because if we do not make our industries more protective, we'll be moving into the territory which were there in the Cold War period. What was in the Cold War period? That we were not open to the international economy. We had very high tariff. We had import substitution policy. We had this self-dependent kind of system. We should not get into the system, because our major advantage at the moment is cheap labor. We need to develop our manufacturing, and we need to export more rather than import, just focus on import substitution. But anyway, that is one aspect of the entire debate. What is happening at the global level, that you see that the trade war has become very, very important. And when I'm talking the trade war, I'm referring to trade war which you see between United States and China on the one hand, and also China and European Union, and China, India, and China and other countries. For instance, China and United States has a trade of nearly $600 billion. It varies, sometimes it's 650 or something. Out of that, the export from United States goes to China about 200 billion or something, and it imports around 350 billion. This United States has a trade deficit of nearly $350 billion, and that's a huge thing. And that's the reason you see that why United States is talking about two things. One is that trade, raising the tariff, and second is decoupling of the economy. What is the decoupling of the economy? Decoupling of the economy means that United States is promoting trying to create their own manufacturing bases, so that they do not have to import products from China. Now, the problem is that, the China or the countries like China, India, or the other countries, they have very competitive industry because of the cheap labor. United States does not have that advantage. So the kind of system that we are trying to create, that might create another kind of imbalance in the system. So trade war is happening between US and China, and that will reflect also in between China and India. Recently, many of the apps, 59 apps India banned. That was very symbolic, but also India is trying to adopt a policy of cutting down the imports from China. And the entire policy of Atmanirbhar is basically guided to cut down the imports from China. So, but the problem is that, even if you cut down the import from China, the world is very complicated. What will happen that, that Chinese companies will invest in South Asia, and, you will import from South Asia. So you are basically importing the Chinese product, but not from China, but you are importing through Southeast Asia. Now, you cannot ban import from every other country, because if you ban import from every other country, the other countries are going to do the same for you. Similarly, Chinese company can invest in one of the European countries, and you will be importing from there. So the world, what I'm trying to say, is very complex, very interdependent, and we need to be very careful when we are supporting the policy which actually leads to more protectionism. Because for a country like India, we need to promote more export. We need to have competitive industry rather than just talking about protectionism and Atmanirbharta. What at the global level and at the political level, what is happening is the decline of the US as a major economic and political power. If I have to show you the map today, you can see that how US influence has receded from number of regions in the world. In South Asia today, the countries which are important, one is India, of course, the most powerful country in South Asia. Another country which has become very important is China. China invested in nearly $50 to $60 billion in Pakistan. It has invested $20 billion in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and now is investing heavily in Nepal. So what do you see that US has receded from here? If I take you to the western side, so let's go to Pakistan. Pakistan, US has very low influence now. Iran, zero influence. Central Asia, the neighboring country, US has no influence, only Russia has influence. Iraq used to be earlier under US influence, but since the time Shiite have come to power, US has no influence there. Then I take you to Saudi Arabia is one country where US has influence, but Syria no influence, and this then Turkey Turkey used to be a NATO member, and Turkey used to play a very important role for United States in the Middle East. But now Turkey is importing weapons from Russia, and as a member, Turkey and Greece are fighting conflict over some of the islands in Cyprus and in that region. So NATO is in drift. So what I'm trying to say here that US has lost its influence in the majority of the part of the world. In European countries, now the European countries are thinking that that the kind of policies that Trump administration promoted, that was very anti-European. So there is countries like Germany and France, they would clearly not like United States to play the hegemonistic role in the European Union. Italy wants to have a very good relation with Russia and China. Similarly, in South China Sea, that earlier it was completely under the US influence because US was a resident power in Philippines and Southeast Asian or the ASEAN countries. Now the ASEAN countries are trying to balance China and United States. Now the question that I'm asking you that where is the US influence now? So US has gradually receded in terms of its political and military influence, and US is being replaced by regional powers. I'm not saying that China is replacing in all parts of the world, but US is gradually being countered by the growing Chinese influence. In South China Sea, the Spratly Island, etc., that you see that every day the news is about South China Sea, conflict in South China Sea, etc. So there, the Chinese have made the artificial reef and they define the South China Sea by the 9th dash line, which is not accepted by countries like the neighboring countries like Philippines or Vietnam, Brunei, Malaysia, etc. So they are opposing both China, they're opposing the Chinese policy in the region. But at the same time, the Southeast Asian countries, they are careful not to go completely with the United States because they know that United States is a distant power and China is the neighboring country. They have the geographical congruity with China. So they're very careful in forging alliance with the United States against China in that region. So what I'm trying to say that the US influence is in decline, and because of US policies, some of the policies of the United States, the institutions have also declined. WHO, which could have played a huge role, the major role in the international system, that WHO has become defunct today. That Tedros Ghebreyesus, that the head of the WHO. So WHO has become a political football between the United States and China. Why? Because the Tedros, who is the head of the WHO, he won the election with the support of China and became the president there. So the United States is not supporting WHO. United States threatened, not really threatened, it actually cut down the funding of WHO. It's a different thing that the European countries and the other countries still support this WHO, and WHO could have played a major role. A normal expectation should be that in the crisis like this, international crisis, WHO was the one leading institution which could have played a stellar role in promoting the international cooperation for developing the vaccine or countering the coronavirus. But because of the policies because of the conflict between China and the United States, WHO has become unreliable and nobody takes WHO very seriously in today's context. So what I'm trying to say that the growing disability of the US in handling the crisis, it is becoming increasingly evident if you see the last 20 years, there is not a single international problem which has been resolved by the United States. In 1990, when 91, when Soviet Union collapsed, US managed number of crises. Right, the first crisis was that that the way the breakdown or the disintegration of the USSR was managed. So and that was done pretty well. But in the last 20 years, whether I'm talking about Afghanistan, the 9/11 attack, and after that intervention in Afghanistan, today even after 20 years, US has not succeeded to create a stable government in Afghanistan. Compare that with the the World War II period, when the US managed to create international institutions like United Nations Security Council, etc., IMF, World Bank, and later G7. Those institutions were created, and the US also created a stable government in Japan and Germany after these countries were devastated by the World War II. But the kind of the role that it could have played, US is not able to play, and it is becoming increasingly evident that you see the case of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is still very messy. Iraq has become messier. There is a clear loss of US influence in Syria. The US failed to control the terrorist forces in Syria, and they were attacking the regime of Bashar Assad. Iran is totally out of loop. Iran is beyond the control of United States. So tell me one example where US has played the role in the last 20 years. The second major international crisis was the economic global recession of 2009. Earlier, the economic crisis used to originate in the third world countries, but the origin of the epicenter of that recession of 2009 crisis was United States, and the real estate crisis and the way it escalated on the collapse of bank, etc. So US failed to manage that crisis. Some of the countries which actually supported European Union during that time were the BRICS countries, and that was exactly the time BRICS came into being, 2009. So the United States failed to manage the economic crisis. Now United States failed to manage the Ukrainian crisis. They said that the Ukrainian government they'll come to the rescue, but when it came to the actual rescue, they failed to manage the Ukrainian crisis. They failed to manage the Georgian crisis, Syrian crisis, and finally, when the moment came for playing a major role in the international system through this coronavirus, you see that US has totally failed to manage this crisis internally as well as externally. Many of the poorer countries, or the countries in Africa, Asia, etc., they were looking upon US to provide help. But US is caught in its own dilemma, where US has failed to, US is still debating whether people should be wearing the mask or not. Because of the policies of the Trump administration, the COVID crisis is a huge mess in US. As I told you, nearly 1.7 lakh people have died, and the job loss is nearly 2 crore. US population would be nearly 30 crore. Out of that, the working population would be around 8 to 9 crores. Out of that, 2 crore people have lost their job. Just imagine the kind of impact this COVID crisis is having in the United States. Luckily, there are some signs that Trump administration might go finally. He might lose in the coming election. All the indications are that Joe Biden might become the president of the United States. But what I'm trying to say that US has lost its legitimacy as a global leader. In the last 20 years, it has not managed any crisis. The alliances which were there, the NATO is also being questioned by country like Turkey, a country like Germany, or country like France, Italy, etc. So NATO is in a crisis. Atlantic Rift, as I told you, Russia is totally unmanageable for United States. So the kind of leadership that was expected from the US, it is not happening. So, and it is killer contrast to the previous policy where US managed Germany, Japan, disintegration of the USSR, later Kosovo, etc. And the way US created institutions, but now US is retreating from those institutions like IMF, World Bank, etc. So those institutions have not remained effective. United Nations Security Council, most of the agendas are disputed by Russia and China, and India has a rightful claim in the United Nations Security Council, but India cannot become the member of the Security Council because of the politics that and you can ask me later. And so what is happening at the regional level? And now I'm bringing you back to the region so that you have an idea that what kind of world we are looking for in the future. It's now like it's a mix of unipolar, multipolar complex. What is happening at the moment is that that US is likely to US wants to remain the unipolar. US wants the world to remain unipolar, but the problem is that, as I told you, that US cannot manage the international system. China would like to have a unipolar Asia, where China becomes the most important country in Asia, but it is seeking a bipolar or multipolar world where US and China will dominate. So China is looking for that kind of system. Russia would like to have unipolar Eurasia. Unipolar Eurasia mean where in Eurasia Russia wants to play the most important role. It would not allow any other country to become powerful in that region. I'm talking about the Central Asia, etc. So in Central Asia, Russia militarily and also through international the CSTO, etc., Shanghai Cooperation Organization, etc. Russia would like to have a unipolar control in Eurasia, and it would not allow other countries it would not allow that region to become multipolar. Similarly, India wants to remain unipolar in South Asia, but it at the global level it would like to become the world multipolar, and so that complexity is creating some kind of tension in the system. That when for instance in South Asia, what is happening that the moment China starts investing in either Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Nepal, so that becomes a huge concern for India. Hambantota port or the port in this Bangladesh, or in railway hydroelectric resources being created by China in Nepal. So that becomes a cause of concern for India. Why? Because India wants South Asia to remain under the sphere of influence of India. So similarly, China wants to control South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, Japan, etc. So that is leading to tension, and that is creating a lot of conflict in the international system. The problem is that Pax Americana is gone, but Pax Sinica, Pax China, the Chinese empire. So that is not happening anytime soon. There's a huge gap now between US and China. So US is not able to play the leading role, but at the same time, US has not been replaced by China. China does not have that kind of either economic, ideological, or political influence in the other countries. So because of that complexity in the international system that you see today. But what is happening, as I told you, because these governments are also failing that people. As I told you, because because unemployment issue, because of the rising aspirations of the middle class, they cannot cater to. So they are deflecting the blame, and China also because of the internal factionalism, because the government of Xi Jinping is questioned by the other factions like the Li Qiang and other people. So Chinese government is also trying to deflect the tension. And as a consequence, what you see that China is very assertive in South China Sea. The Xi Jinping has clearly said that China would acquire the territory of Taiwan. Taiwan, as you know, is a different state, and it is recognized not by many countries, but some of the countries do recognize Taiwan as an independent state. And recently, China passed a law in the Hong Kong. China had one country, two system, but now China passed a national security law in Hong Kong. And basically the idea is to integrate Hong Kong and make it one country, one system kind of, this thing, one country, one system kind of rule. So because of that, many of the countries are canceling the free trade agreement, etc., that they had with Hong Kong. So similarly, the BRI that you see, that BRI is not succeeding in many places, and China fears that BRI, because the countries may not be able to pay the loans. It happened in Sri Lanka, it happened in Malaysia, it might happen in Pakistan, it also might happen in Central Asian countries. So because of that, China fears that the economic slowdown that started, it might get further accelerated due to the COVID crisis, and China's reputation is at stake. Because Trump started saying that Chinese virus, Wuhan virus, etc. And also many of the countries think that Chinese policy was not very transparent. China did not inform the world correctly and on time about the coronavirus crisis. And had China informed other countries on time, so probably this spread of the virus could have been controlled by other countries on time. So because of that, Chinese reputation in many countries is at stake, and China do not have many countries as their alliance partner. If I leave aside Pakistan and North Korea, Iran to an extent, and Russia. So China does not have many international partners. So China's reputation is really at a stake. So what China is doing as a consequence, China is trying to deflect the blame. China is trying to behave very assertively. China is trying to, the leadership is trying to say that China is still very powerful. The kind of policy that we have in South China Sea, the kind of Chinese policy that we saw in Ladakh recently, where the conflict took place. So China is becoming very assertive internally as well as externally, and that is causing a lot of tension in the region. So now the question that you might be having in your mind, and I must clarify that: do you think that a new Cold War kind of situation is emerging? My answer is clearly no. Although there are some people who believe that what is happening is a new Cold War kind of system, where the conflict between this China and United States will take a new shape, and these two countries may come to fight. But my contention is that there is no kind of the ideological tension which was there between Soviet Union and China and United States earlier. That ideological conflict does not exist in today's world. China is not necessarily a socialist country. China, we have state capitalism in China. Chinese policy, they do not have the ideological coherence that you saw in the Soviet Union. China is unable to influence the countries with its ideology or economy alone. So as a consequence, what is happening that China will not be able to create an alliance which Soviet Union created in the Cold War period. The soft power element which was there in the of the USSR and of course of the capitalist countries, that soft power influence China does not have. So group of countries, so what I'm saying, I do not necessarily see the world in which you'll have one bloc, Chinese bloc on the one side and the American bloc on the other side. What we see that is going to be a very complex world, where there'll be a number of regional powers. Russia will remain very, very important militarily. India will become more powerful gradually in the region. European Union will remain the economic powerhouse in that region. US is still going to remain important in the next 10 to 15 years. And China is not going to replace US in the at least next 10 to 15 years. So because of that, all of that, I do not necessarily see a Cold War kind of situation emerging. Now, the final question, that I would like to, point out that how India is responding, because, the Indian response is very, very important. So we have to understand how India is responding. You have to understand that the traditional policy of India has been to balance the superpowers, and we have not deviated much from that policy. We have always maintained that, strategic autonomy is very, very important for India. And that's the reason we had this policy of non-alignment movement during the earlier period. And in the post-Cold War period, we started saying that we have a policy of multi-alignment. What multi-alignment meant is basically a very ambiguous kind of policy, but it said that India will have alliance with all the countries in the world. So India signed a very important deal with the United States, but at the same time, India remained very, very close to Russia. India also signed a strategic partnership deal with China in 2005. So what India said that India would like to engage with all the countries in the world. So the dominant trend of India continues even today in India's foreign policy. India even today does not trust the Trump administration very much. So India is still very skeptical of the Trump or the US policy. India does not know that what kind of alliance China and United States might have when the next government comes to power. So India would not like to take a side and sign a deal with NATO kind of deal with United States. Rather, India would like to play safe, where India has an agreement with United States, but also it will have a deal with Russia and other countries, other important countries. So India has enhanced its ties with the United States, but it's still short of military alliance. India is a member of Quad, as you know. Quad is a quadrilateral alliance where it's an informal grouping actually, where Australia, Japan, India, and United States. These countries participate on the issue of political and security matters, especially in the in the Indo-Pacific region, where China has become assertive. India also does Malabar exercises with United States, and that is a military practice. And it's very likely that in the near future you'll see that Japan is already participating, but Australia also might participate. Quad was created in 2007, but it was totally inactive because of the India's policy of multi-alignment, India's policy of balancing. So now it has become active again after 2017. And India, as you know, so there are two clear trends in India's foreign policy. One is the dominant trend, and the second one is the subordinate trend. The dominant trend at the moment is have an alliance with, have a close security cooperation with United States, but also have agreements or very close cooperation with other countries like Russia. So as a consequence, what you see that even if India has a very close strategic cooperation with the United States, India will still be the member of BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India, despite the conflict that we have with China, India still considers BRICS to be an important forum, because India knows that Russia can play a very important role in the region in balancing both China and India. So India would not like to retreat from BRICS. India has invested political and economic resources in creating the BRICS, and now it would not like to withdraw just because of the dominance of China in the BRICS or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So because of Russia, India would like to remain active in these two organizations. So it's a kind of, India wants a regional unipolarity, where in South Asia, the other countries should not become very powerful, and global multipolarity. India prefers a policy where the US remains important, China is another power, Russia, European countries, and of course India also plays a very important. So India is looking for that kind of international system. As I told you, that Atmanirbhar is fine. The policy of Atmanirbhar, where you try to cut down your import, that is fine. Promoting your manufacturing is also needed. You need to have a manufacturing basis so that you can employ millions of people who are unemployed in India, especially people who are shifting from rural areas to urban areas. So you need to create a better education, you need to create a better skill training, you need to create more industries. But the import substitution in the long run is not a good policy, because if your manpower is productive, if your industry is competitive, you should always have an open policy rather than a closed door policy, and that is not very helpful. And one more thing that India needs to be very careful about, that in comparison to China, the one reason why India is always praised by the international community is the democracy and development. If China was rising, but China had an authoritarian system. China was a system where you never really know what was the exact figure of poverty. You never really know what was the figure of unemployment. So the actual data was always under suspicion. But India, on the other hand, was trusted by the other countries, because it was a democracy. It was there was a transparency. There was freedom of speech. Media was free. Our Supreme Court was known to be free. So there were important checks and balances on the political system that we had created, where no one person could become very powerful, or no political party for that matter could have become very powerful because of the checks and balances. But now there is a fear. Now there's a fear that so the institutions which worked as checks and balances, free media, the legal system, or even the other political parties, that the kind of role that they played, so they are becoming weak. And because of the cultural nationalism, the voices of dissent are being suppressed. And you cannot create a nation where a large chunk of people are not accommodated in the system. So we need to protect that democracy. We need to protect the culture of dissent, and if we grow as a country, as a democracy plus democracy plus development, if that comes together, so that will become the model for most of the countries in Africa, Latin America, and also in Asia. So that is something that we need to protect. Democracy plus development, and that will be the biggest counter for China. because one thing that China fears is democracy. In Hong Kong, Taiwan, Xinjiang, Tibet, etc., they fear democracy. They do not fear the army. So if we can retain our democracy, so that would be the biggest counter to growing Chinese influence and ideology in the region. And of course, let me tell you that our army is very strong enough to protect our borders from China. China cannot defeat India. If first, let me tell you that there is a unlikely that two nuclear powers will come to conflict. But so whenever there are two nuclear powers, there is always a chance of proxy or limited war, but there will not be a full-fledged war between India and China. That's extremely unlikely. That's extremely rare. But the limited war, proxy war, China will support Pakistan, Pakistan will send terrorists to India. So that will keep happening. So we need to prepare a policy where we have to counter China politically, economically, and of course militarily. And an overemphasis on cultural nationalism that has its diplomatic limitation, that creates a lot of suspicion among the neighbors and also for the other countries. So I think with that I gave you a broad, brief background of the international system, and I think I'll stop it here. And if there is something left, I can discuss in the Q&A. And thank you so much. I took a little longer time, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kumar, for your in-depth, detailed, and thought-provoking analysis regarding the present global order and addressing the every aspect of world politics and global order, starting from Indo-US relation to China-US relations and failure of the multilateral institutions to address the tackle this COVID-19 pandemic. And and also there is no possibility of war between India China regarding the recent border tension between India and China. And also you have also highlighted that this is not a new phase of Cold War between between China or US. Thank you. There is one question from Ganpati Bhattacharya. Is it possible for all the country or for a single country to be self-reliant? Absolutely.
Okay, so do you want me to answer the question now, or we can take it later? What do you say? Can I answer it?
Yes, just.
Okay, so there are a few questions in the chat box. So if you allow me, so then I can answer it very quickly. I would like to answer. So as you said that, is it possible for the countries to become self-reliant? That is a double-edged sword. A sword which has two sides. That will cut from both the sides. What I'm trying to say here is that if every country become Atmanirbhar, so then what will happen to export import? In the last 300-400 years of history, what has happened is that the international trade has increased. It has intensified, not only trade, but also the kind of global information exchange that we are having, the kind of the people's migration from one place to other that is happening. You have now in America the vice president who is of Indian origin. So migration is an important aspect of that movement of capital. Movement of capital is always followed by the movement of people. So India, we cannot support a policy where every country becomes Atmanirbhar. Then we'll have no country to export to. So where will you? So Atmanirbhar, if your industry is not competitive, if your the human power is not skilled, so then Atmanirbhar is a good policy. But if you have a competitive industry, if you have competitive people, skilled people, then Atmanirbharta is not a great policy. It can be a short-time emergency measure, but in long time, it cannot be a good policy. Second question is from Sukhdev Das. As you mentioned, China would like to have a unipolar Asia, multipolar world, but Chinese order imitative does not deserve it as a multipolar world. So how would you ignore the issue of OBOR imitative? OBOR, okay. So he's asking basically about the OBOR. OBOR is now termed as BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. So this Chinese BRI is an because it's basically an idea, because Chinese had huge surplus. They had trillions of dollars as reserves, and not many countries in the world today have those kind of reserves. So they thought, that instead of keeping that in US Treasury or in the banks, it's better to invest in other countries. And what China is doing through BRI, that China is giving loans to smaller countries like Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Thailand, Pakistan, Central Asian country, and those loans have to be repaid. China's $55 billion investment in Pakistan, that has to be repaid. A Gwadar port that it made in China, that has to be repaid. In Sri Lanka, what happened that Sri Lanka failed to pay the debt. And since Sri Lanka could not pay the debt, so the Hambantota port was leased to China for 99 years. So, that kind of a problem that BRI or OBOR is facing. And one of the biggest failure of the BRI is that India did not become the part of BRI. Remember this, because China thought that India has a huge population, and every seventh person, as you know, is an Indian. So if India, and is a growing economy, so if India does not become the part of BRI, so it means it's not going to be successful in South Asia with exclusion of India. BRI in Central Asia have very limited resources. Now many of the countries of the West, like United States, Germany, they have become suspicious of BRI. So they will not be the part of actively participate in BRI. So as a consequence, BRI has its limitation. India was the first country which opposed participation in the BRI, and it is now being supported by Japan, by United States, by European country. So India is trying to create an alternative system, but real issue is funding. India needs funding, and that funding can come only from Japan or European countries or United States. Okay, so my next question is, if India is militarily so strong, Ganpati Bhattacharya, if India is militarily so strong, then why India is not becoming more aggressive against China? Well, my answer here is as much as you already know, because see, as I told you, that it's not good for the two nuclear countries to escalate tension. Because it's easier to speak on the TV channels, or when you're speaking in a very limited forum, when you're trying to provoke in the mindset. But the real war is not the computer game, right? Thousands of people will die. If there is a real war between India and China, our economy, which is already in crisis, that economy will also suffer, and Chinese economy will also suffer. And also, you fight a war when you know that you are likely to win the war. You sometimes you can fight against Pakistan because the likelihood of winning a conventional war against Pakistan is very high, but winning a conventional war against China is very, very low. And this applies to China also. It's not that the China can win a war against India. So that's the reason both India and China would not like to escalate. They would not like to go for a full-fledged war. And as I told you, that when the two countries are nuclear, there is no history where two countries are nuclear and they have gone to full-fledged war. There is no such example. Right? India and Pakistan fought in Kargil, but that time they were hardly nuclear, and also they never engaged in full-scale war. It was a very limited kind of war. So what is going to happen in the case of India and China? That standoff that you see today, that standoff will intensify. There will be more standoffs because China is objecting to construction of roads by India. So that standoff will continue, but I don't see a real war happening between the two countries. Next, Soma Mukhopadhyay, is geopolitical balancing a residual part of the policy of non-alignment? That's a very interesting question. And if you ask me, I do see a trend where India has tried to maintain a policy of strategic autonomy. And that strategic autonomy, India in the non-alignment period, it said that it will not be part of any world, any bloc, and it will maintain its strategic autonomy. Immediately when US became very powerful after the post-Cold War period, during the post-Cold War period, in the last 20 or 30 years, India started saying that it's going to have a multi-alignment policy, right? So multi-alignment policy where India will engage with the United States, but at the same time, India will also engage with Russia. And also it engaged with China to a great extent. So it followed a policy of multi-alignment. And now, what I see a major trend today, if you ask me, that Indian foreign policy has two simultaneous trends. One is the dominant trend, where India is trying to establish a close relation with the United States, but a subordinate trend which is also simultaneous and parallel. And parallel is that India would also like to have a very close partnership with Russia for that matter. So India is having that kind of policy, and that kind of balancing continues in different forms, whether it's the form of non-alignment or multi-alignment or the twin policy that I told you just now. So that balancing continues. I think these were the questions that I saw in the chat box. So if there is any other question, you can ask me.
I think, sir, there are no other questions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Yeah.
And our next speaker of the session is Dr. Vijay Kumar Das. He is in the Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University. And his area of interest is Central Asia and major powers. In his 14-year teaching experience, he has published lots of books, and one of his recent books is India's Foreign Policy towards Central Asia, and one of his upcoming book is India's Neighborhood Policy, Continuity and Changes. So in this context, I would like to invite Dr. Vijay Kumar Das to speak about the changes of international order in the contemporary situation. Welcome to Dr. Vijay Kumar Das.
Thank you, Chittaranjan. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, go on. Yes, go on.
Thank you, Chittaranjan. I would like to also thank to Professor Soma Madam, Piyush Chakraborty, and Chittaranjan, my friend, for inviting me to say something about the seminar. So it was a very good paper. Rajan's, my friend Rajan had presented a very good paper, a very well-versed paper regarding the theoretical and the structural aspect of international system and what has been changing within such structural and functional aspect. Keeping in mind the world politics, basically the politics between China and US, and the politics in the regional and sub-regional level. So it was a very wonderful and very good verse paper. Thank you, Rajan, very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
I will basically highlight some of the basic issues of international relations, and from there I will try to find out the changes that has been occurring since last 5 to 6 months. During the COVID-19 pandemic situation, and what are the changes that has been taken place in the international order or international system. So basically, when we are talking about international order, it is generally a process through which the version of international system has been represented. So in this situation, first of all, I will basically highlight some of the major issues that will affect basically the question relating to the changes of the present international system and present the process of international order. So first of all, I will highlight, or I will talk about the most important dynamics of international relation or international theory, which is basically a realistic theory. So the pandemic situation or COVID-19 situation basically emphasizing the need for the realistic theory, where the state dominate all the non-state actors and the state dominate all institutions, including the society, including the groups, including various organizations, etc. The state has been given more powerful to represent its own interest against or versus the interest of the society and the interest of groups on the other hand. So if you go through the realistic doctrine from 1930 to basically late 40s, so you will find that realistic doctrine based on omnipotence of the state, and the state does not consider other organizations as equivalent to state regarding the protection of the citizen from the external threat and internal disturbance. State is almost taking the responsibility or to protect, how to protect the border or how to protect the territory and how to protect the interest. So here we find there is a two dimension of state responsibility. One is state morality and another is individual morality or group morality, whatever it may be. When the state morality is coincide with the group morality or individual morality, then the society is well balanced and the state is considered a good state. When state dominate or state dominate the interest of the individual and group and society, then it is a omnipotent and a police. Hello. So therefore, state, when we are talking about state morality means state is all powerful to decide what is good for the citizen and what is good for the territory and what is good for the society also. So state morality in the context is applying because of state is thinking what is good and what is bad, keeping in mind the interest of the society and interest of the threat that is from outside and that threat from inside. So the threat from outside that can be adjusted with the state act of diplomacy by using physical force or by using the economic force also. But regarding the welfare measures, regarding the interest of the groups and interest of the society, which is not coincide with the state morality or state interest, there will be a great divide between the state and society. The state want to dominate all these institutions of the society, including the groups, including the including the group and including the institutions interest. So therefore, the pandemic situation, the 19 COVID pandemic situation witnessed a clear dominance of state over other institutions regarding economic, regarding social, and regarding political aspects. So therefore, the other institution of the society or the non-state actor, the civil society that has been marginalized, their work has been marginalized and their opinions have not been considered by the state. So state is all powerful and there is a muscle power of the state which is represented by the physical force or the physical resources of the state. And the 19 pandemic situation clearly witnessed the realistic version of international relations of 30s and 40s, and and it and it is utmost rejecting the other aspect of society, including the civil society, including the non-state actors, which are working for the betterment of the society and the individual in the field of environment, in the field of housing, in the field of water, and etc. So therefore, we visibly, clearly or visibly witnessed a dominance picture of realism in the international system. The second aspect is basically what I am talking about, the notion of the doctrine of national security and the debate between the traditional security and the non-traditional security. So it is always be a debatable or a debatable aspect of international relation. One is whether the traditional security is the priority area of the state or the non-traditional security area are also coming to the state context while the state is taking decision or while the state is making foreign policy. So always we have been seen that the state is more cordial, more cordial to the traditional notion of security in compared to the non-traditional security, non-traditional aspect of security. So you can deal with the traditional aspect of security by using your national power, by using your national resources, but you can't deal with the non-traditional security aspect, which is, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic situation, by using alone your national resources and national power. So that's why you need an approach, a holistic approach, in holistic, which is combination of your national resources, which would be combination of your national resources, your intellectual resources, and the resources of the society which has been contributed since the state has been created. So therefore, the state favor to the traditional notion of security, or the using of the traditional notion of protecting the state is also witnessing in the COVID-19 situation. So if you discuss the rivalry between the US and if you see the rivalry between the US and China, then even if the China in the Asian continent also, if you see the rivalry between India and China, you will find that the clear-cut scenario of the issue of their physical power and the traditional power. So alone traditional power cannot solve all the problems that society has been confronting, or this society has been confronting present and in future. So you have to balance between your traditional and non-traditional security. Within that context also, national security and biosecurity. So there is also debate and discussion about what is national security and what is biosecurity. So you have the state has control over the national security, but state does not have alone control over the biosecurity, which is in the nature of the COVID-19 scenario. So that cannot be under the purview of one superpower, maybe two superpower, maybe group of superpower. So all the countries should be united, all the efforts should be united so that we can fight the COVID-19 situation very well. So therefore, the doctrine of national security, which is combination of both traditional and non-traditional security, and the emphasis here, the state had to take very serious step regarding how to restore the non-traditional security over the traditional security issues. So, so we can easily deal with the situation like the 19 COVID situation. So within that context also, another aspect that we will discuss, that is basically the relevance of national power and influence. So national power and influence in a unilateral manner cannot solve this COVID. Here the picture is very clear. So the two leading power, the two superpower, US and China, is basically showing their, in this situation, showing their national power and resources. So that cannot solve the problem. So national power and national resources should be utilized in a manner so humanity and the humankind will be benefited from that. So alone national power and national resources cannot solve the problem which is in the nature of bioessential or biosecurity nature. So keeping in mind, since 1945, when the United Nations was formed, and then after many international organizations came into existence with different purposes in different walk of individual life and group's life. So present we have witnessing a rampant amount of defunctioning of such vast international institutions, including the UN also, regarding how to restore peace and tranquility in the world, and how to provide a better framework to coordinate the approaches of different countries to fight with the COVID-19 situation. So basically, for example, if you look at the functioning of WHO, you will definitely find out that WHO is doing nothing, just is a talking shop. So sometimes the WHO favors China, sometimes the WHO favors the United States. So WHO lacks the agenda and the legitimacy to basically to perform a very constructive role in bringing peace and tranquility in the world. So similarly, many other international institutions are mere puppet of both Russia and China. So their financial and their functional aspect is dependent on the two leading giants, that is US and China. So authenticity and legitimacy of such institutions are basically influenced by the dominance of China and the dominance of US. So the institutional crisis in the international, we have clearly seen the institutional crisis in the international level. So institutions are defunctioned, institutions are paralyzed, institutions are biased. So what can we expect from such institutions which have been created with a novel idea and novel purpose to solve the problems of humanity? So that is basically now, if you in the national level also, if you find out, if you look at the functioning of the judiciary also depressed, and the functioning of other branches of the government, other aspect of the government, other aspect of the society also does. So that is because of the state dominance to deal with such problems. Here, dominance because in an international system, the dominance because of the two superpowers and their version of solution to the problem and other to follow it. So that has been witnessing since 4 to 5. So in this context, so China basically when China basically having two main objective. One is superpower in the Asian continent, and Asian power, the supergiant in Asia, considered as Asian power or supergiant in Asia, Asian continent, and also a leading superpower in the world context also. That is not possible now. The first aspect you can China can imagine, but the second aspect China cannot imagine because of China is far behind than the US in terms of economic development, in terms of military know-how, or in terms of the influence that has been created by the US. Though the last 10 years witnessed the lack of influence of US administration or lack of legitimacy in the lack of legitimacy of the world opinion. So still US is considered far ahead of China. So China ambition to be a leading or to be only superpower in the world context is always obsolete. So that cannot be realized and that cannot be fulfilled. So similarly, in terms of influence of the two powers, if you look at the influence of two powers around the globe or around different parts of the world, you find the China is rising in Africa, China is rising in Asia, China is rising in Central Asia. So and influence of US in terms of propagating the basic ethos of democratic principle or the basic parameters of democracy is failing. Last 10 years we have witnessed. There is no doubt about the state propagation of democracy in Central Asia, the state propagation of democracy in Asia, the state propagation of democracy in Africa, the state propagation of democracy in the Arab world. Also, the United States is failing. So mostly the failing is for one reason, that is the legitimacy crisis of the leadership. The present US leader is basically lacking the legitimacy of ruling this state, and therefore there is no unanimity of faith, international faith or faith of the country on US to lead to lead the world in a rightful direction. So that is why. So Professor Rajan has rightly criticized. I also thank Professor Rajan to criticize and highlighting the weakness of the US last 10 or 15 years. So China is over ambitious now. So that is not good for China, Chinese economy and Chinese influence also. Over ambitious, China may be ambitious, but over ambitious is always bad. China thought I can defeat. China thinks I can defeat the US, I can defeat India, I can defeat any countries of the world. So that is not possible, and it is a very imagination kind of thing. And last 10 to 14 years, we have clearly witnessed there is a dramatic shift or dramatic change of Chinese foreign policy. So under the leadership of Xi Jinping, so the peaceful rise concept of China has been abandoned. The peaceful rise of China has been abandoned. So Xi Jinping doesn't have any belief on the soft power diplomacy. He had always believed in the hard power. So hard power, according to him, hard power can create the avenues of soft power. So he is a very strong believer of the realistic doctrine and influenced by the film Godfather. So therefore, The Chinese foreign policy, though China has been over-ambitious and always ready to use its physical forces or physical attributes to control over the region or to control or to defeat the region. So Chinese economy or Chinese way of making bilateral economic relations around the globe is diminishing. We have seen last 5 months. So economic bilateralism is another aspect of Chinese growth or Chinese development. So economic, if you force a physical aspect of threat to every country, or if you always ready to restore physical force, then you have to lose your economic avenues to create more economic resource, or to basically to you have to lose your economic dimensions of the relations. So China, the main problem of in present China is the internal disturbance within the China. So China has vast internal disturbances, basically keeping in mind the situation, basically the unemployment situation, the ethnic situation. So China is also at the national level struggling with how to solve the national problem. Maybe through repression, maybe through. So China always prefer to solve all the problems through repression. So repression measure last 10 years or 15 years we have been witnessing. Repression is one of the important diplomatic tool to solve the China's problem. So China's belief in soft power diplomacy or China's belief in religion, faith has been overshadowed, and that has been replaced by China's attribute to its national resources, Chinese attributes to its physical strength, and Chinese attributes to its economic strength. So, so another aspect I want to basically highlight the changes basically in the international order is basically the aspect relating to basically economic engagement and integration process. So the last 4 5 months or 6 months, we have been clearly seen that there is no step at international level, or there is no step at multilateral level, there is no step at bilateral level how to integrate economy, how to integrate different economy, and the national integration project has been stalled, and there is no basically there is no effort on part of the country to how to restore, how to improve their economic bilateralism through the engaging or integrating one economic with other. So that is also another problem. Economic integration has been stalled, and the economic engagement also has been stalled. That led to severe devastation with the world economy and the economic of the regional and sub-regional entities. So keeping in mind the power rivalry in terms with the so another aspect is why there is a power rivalry between US and China. So power rivalry is not mere the show of their physical strength. Power rivalry is also to intensify the basically the value system, the liberal value system on the one hand, and the Confucian, the Chinese value system on the other hand. So end of ideology thesis, if you go through the end of ideology thesis, so you will find that there is no ideology which is uh, basically has some influence in the matter of international relations. So no, here ideology, value system plays a leading role in determining the future course of international action and the future process of international order. So it is clearly visible. The last 4 or 5 months has been clearly visible that the two superpowers are fighting with relating to the how to restore their supremacy in terms of how to restore their supremacy in terms of their value judgment. Well, US has failed to propagate, or US has failed to restore the democratic value system in different part of the country. China is in some extent has been successful in restoring the Chinese the Confucius ideology and the basically ideology in contest in contrast with the democratic, in contrast with the democratic value system. China is very fearful about the rise of democratic value system in not only in continent of Asia, not only in continent of Africa, not only in continent of the Latin America or Central Asia. So how to contain, or how to condemn or how to contain the democratic value system is one of the basic argument of the Chinese diplomacy regarding the contention between the two superpowers. Similarly, US has been also trying to propagate or trying to restore its earlier version of the democratic order in Asia and different part of the world. However, US has failed in very large extent to restore democratic order. So the countries, the regional countries prefer national democracy rather than universal democracy. So national democracy in some extent is basically carried with the basic principle of their civilization, basic principle and basic ethos of their culture, their value system, all these things. They will go to in line with their national democratic principle, which has been restored, which has been functioned since 100 years or 200 years or more than that. So why there will be a inclination towards the universal democratic value system, which has rooted or which is basically controlled by the one leading power, that is US. So clear the rivalry in terms of the physical muscular capacity or the physical resource, all these have the root cause of their dominance and their influence in terms of their religious, cultural aspect also. So another aspect which has been pertinent during the last 5 months or 6 months, that is change in the notion of multilateralism. So it is a clear-cut limitation on the notion of multilateralism. So it is going through a phase or through a process which basically encourages unilateralism, not multilateralism. Maybe unilateralism, maybe the head of the unilateralism aspect is maybe China or US. That is different issue. But multilateralism, a multilateral aspect of approach, multilateral dimension of economic and political development, that has been clearly eroded from international environment or international order. So multilateralism got a severe attack in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic situation, and the superpower, the leading superpower, little bother about how to restore multilateralism. They are basically fighting with each other for their unilateral action, unilateral approach to solve world problems. So multilateralism or multilateral aspect dealing with different problems or dealing with different development issue has been severely attacked. Another aspect which has been which has slightly changed during the pandemic situation is basically the nature and content of international order. So if you look at the earlier version of unipolar, bipolar and multipolar order, so before the 19 pandemic, we can clearly say that it's a unipolar, it's a multipolar world. But now, some extent, it is a multipolar within a unipolar. So within a unipolar, that is multipolar. That means it's a hybrid type of the polarization system. So multipolar within a unipolar. So whatever maybe the Chinese leadership, whatever maybe the US leadership, that is basically feasible for the next few months or the next few years. It is not permanent. I can't say it will be continuing 10 years, 15 years or 20 years. But in the limited period, we can see that the order or the international influence is basically, though structurally it is multilateral, but functionally it will be unilateral. So keeping with this unilateral aspect of the international order or multilateral debate between unilateral and multilateral aspect of the international order, within that aspect, we will also highlight some of the points that it basically deals with. There is no concrete unit or universal approach to deal with such the COVID-19 pandemic. So there is no unanimity. There is no unanimity of state regarding how to basically deal with such problem. So states are struggling with such problem with their own resources and with their own technological know-how. So there is no universal as such, just like in a terrorism, issue of terrorism. Similarly, the case is there is no universal approach at how to deal with such a vast problem, which not only devastating the economic aspect of the society, also devastating the political aspect, including the governance of the country, including the life of the individual, including the survival of the mankind also. So universal approach is needed to deal with such problem. So there is no voice of the voice of the developing countries or the voice of the underdeveloping countries are represented in this context. So what is going, it is a drama between the two superpower and the inclusion of the some of the major international institutions, that is the for example the WHO. So the voice of the third world countries and the other developed countries are basically boycotted, or basically they are not taken into consideration. So that cannot, if you only taken into account the voice and approaches of the developed countries, for example China, US, the European Union, uh, and India, the other countries, the voice of the approaches of other countries uh, would be very problematic in in dealing with such problems. So we have to take into account the approaches, the interest of the developing or the underdeveloped countries also. So within that aspect, another challenge to Western the liberal order is also coming from two fronts. One is from the uh, Chinese perspective, and another is from the third world countries perspective. The third world countries, basically the developing countries, are not in a position to accept the leadership of the US, or the ideological value system that has been influenced by that has been influenced very much international institution in the near future. So they are also started questioning regarding the legitimacy crisis, or regarding the authority of the United to deal with such pandemic situation alone also. The challenges before the Western liberal order, the challenges before the Western liberal order is also come from within. So within if you look at the situation in United States of America, so you will find that there is a huge opposition of the present leadership against the present leadership, how the present leadership is rule the country, and how the present leader is directing the future international order. That has been also criticized from within their countries also. So the present leadership, the Trump leadership, is incapable of providing a high value or democratic order which has been accepted, or which would like to accept by the other countries. And also the US leadership is also failed to accommodate or to balance the interest of the US economy, US polity in the long run also. In this context, I will do two hypotheses can be raised before concluding my lecture. I will delve with two hypotheses. One is basically, one hypothesis may be the emergence of an world order where China can expand its own influence through its military and economic power to control the world opinion. And another hypothesis would be US still in a position to dominate the international order, which has been based on the democratic value system and democratic principles. And so far as the influence of US on different international institutions, so US is till now capable of influencing the major international institutions. There is no doubt about it. So alliance system, another within that context also, a new alliance system going to open where there are countries who are in tune with the Chinese voice and who are in tune with the US voice. So thank you, thank you very much. Chitanand, can you
Yes,
hear
thank
me?
you, thank you. Yes, yeah, thank you, Professor Das, for your in-depth analysis on theoretical aspect of the state as an actor that can handle the COVID-19 crisis, and also you have highlighted the national security, biosecurity also, and you also highlighted the failure of multilateral institutions in dealing with these pandemic-like situations, and the issue of rising China, that is the threat to not only Asia but the present world order. Thank you, Professor Das, for your excellent lecture. Thank you. Now, today our session is going to end here. I think, is there any question? Is there any question in chat box? If any, please put to Dr. Das so that he can
If you have any question, then ask me.
questions. If there are any questions.
Hello.
Hello.
May I be allowed to ask a question?
Yes, always welcome.
Yes. Good evening. Ajay, there is one saying that nothing is permanent in this world. And accordingly, in case of any position, you cannot be at the zenith for all the time. So naturally, from that, can I presume that United States naturally cannot be at the zenith or at the helm of power throughout the years? So in the natural course, there must come out some another power who will be at the zenith at least for a certain period of time. It may be China, it may be or any other country. And so far as international field is concerned right now, we are talking more about China. So far as it is going, by 2050, it may happen that China is at the apex and then comes United States. But at the same time, you see some potential power groups are also coming out. And India belongs to that category along with Indonesia, Nigeria, Brazil, so and so forth, Mexico, if I am not wrong. And then they are coming out some middle class power group, middle group. And moreover, some new sort of groupings are coming out. Instead of G7, G77, we are getting BRICS and so and so forth. So do you think that this will affect, definitely it is to affect the international relations, but should there be any concept at all that yes, this nation or this country is most powerful? Why should we think about that one? The one must be maximum powerful or most powerful, isn't it? When the word is their collective security in the United Nations. So naturally collective power group can come out, and in that case this sort of hegemony won't come out. What is your observation on it?
Okay, thank you very much, Ganapati sir. Thank you very much. So I will try to answer your question. First of all, nothing is permanent in the world. That is very true. Nothing is permanent in the world. If you
Exactly.
look at basically the power asymmetric of China, Russia. Russia once upon a time was a superpower.
Yes.
Now militarily, Russia is superpower. No doubt about it. But economically and politically, Russia is very weak. Now, politically, in the sense of there is no such institution building in Russia and Central Asia. and economically Russia is struggling with many problems. So that is very correctly you have pointed out that nothing is permanent in this world, and China, if China or US, whatever may be, that you cannot say that China will continue till 2050, 2060, or US will continue to that. That cannot, you cannot predict such a big
Definitely.
big frame of time. So what is regarding another aspect to your question, that is there are many international organizations coming up. For example, BRICS, whatever may be, the G7, whatever. But these organizations are some extent or more are influenced by the 2 or 3 superpowers. If you look at the BRICS, the functioning and work of the BRICS, so basically influenced by Russia and China. Other are mere members of there, nothing they can do. But these 2 superpowers, if you look at the functioning in many international organizations, UN Security Council, you have also mentioned collective security. So collective security in the present situation, so united actions. So united actions of all the states. It is not, we have not witnessed such an action, united actions in the present context. So theoretically it looks very sound, but practically all these organization, all these the approaches are basically influenced by either 1, 2, or 3 powers, not more than that. Regarding India, also this rising power, no doubt in Asia, very rising power economically and also military rising power. But India's position or India's rise as whatever, not a superpower, but you can at least imagine can be a regional power. So there are
Yeah, surely.
two regional
Surely
power.
India can't be the superpower right now.
Two regional power. One is China. China is claiming itself as a regional power in Asia, and also India is trying to be a regional hegemon. And the major constant in this context is India's bad neighborhood policy also. So India had never good relation with its neighbor. So if you look at Nepal, with Bhutan, with Pakistan, and with Afghanistan, so India had never a very good neighborhood policy. So that is the major constant of India becoming a regional hegemon. So that aspect has not been found in the context of China. So China, there are two major powers in the Asia. One is China and one is Asia. If you compare the two regional powers, so China is ahead of India in the context
Sure.
of Asia. So
Definitely.
nothing is permanent, sir. So some other power can be replaced the two supergiants. Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Here comes to end of our today's webinar. That was very excellent and thought-provoking. And now I would request my colleague Vishnupad Burman to give vote of thanks of this webinar. Hello, Vishnupad. Hello, Vishnupad, are you there?
Yeah. Sure.
Vishnu, can you hear? Who will give vote of
I
thanks?
think-
Vishnu? Who will give vote of thanks?
Vishnu.
Where is
Hello.
he? He's there, but he has not unmuted.
Vishnu, unmute
Hello.
your mic. Somen. Somen.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he cannot understand. Kitto, do what is necessary. Quick. Be quick.
Okay. Then I will give vote of thanks.
Okay, do it.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Dr. Rajan Kumar, and also my special thanks to Vijay Kumar Das, and many thanks to the teacher in charge of our college, Professor Soma Mukhopadhyay for her help and kind cooperation and inspiration. And thanks to Professor P.S. Chakravarti, the IQC coordinator of the Bagnan College. And my special thanks to all the head of the departments, teachers of Bagnan College, and our staffs of Bagnan College. And my special thanks to Somen Roy, our the Department of Computer Science, for helping and to making this webinar successful. And also my special thanks to all the participants across Bengal, Odisha, or Bihar, those who have participated in today's webinar. And my special thanks to all of them. Thank you and thank you. And we're looking forward for your kind cooperation in future. And thanks. Thanks a lot to be part of our today's national webinar. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chittaranjan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rajan,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
for delivering a wonderful paper.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you.
It was very excellent and thought-provoking and in-depth analysis.
Thank you so
Very good
much.
paper.
Thanks. Very
Thank
good.
you. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.